The rain fell hard on the old wooden roof as the coins hit the table, one by one, cold and heavy. £10. That was the price they placed on Vivian Ashworth. The sound of the metal felt like the closing of a coffin. With every small clink, her old life slipped farther away. No one asked how she felt. No one cared. To them, she was just a quiet girl with no voice, no past that mattered, and no future worth saving. They called her mute. They called her broken. Vivian let them. Silence had become her shield, the only thing the world could not take from her. For 3 long years she had lived in Mr. Horace Petton's dark house in London, where cruelty was as common as dust on the floor. And his nephew Seal was worse, with eyes that followed her and hands that never stayed where they should. Speaking had only brought pain in the past, so she chose not to speak at all. It kept her safe. But before all of this, Vivian had been someone else. She was born in Vienna to a beautiful French countess named Marguerite de Valker. Her mother was light and warmth in human form, loved by everyone who met her. Vivian's father was a British diplomat who never claimed her in public. He loved his comfort more than his child. Still, Vivian's early years were filled with travel, music, and words from many lands. She learned French from her mother, German from the salons of Austria, Italian from servants who adored her, and Russian from a strict tutor. Later came Spanish, Latin, and Greek. By the time she was 12, she could understand almost anyone in any room. Then her mother died. A fever took her away while Vivian was far from home at a school in Switzerland. The girl never cried. The pain was too deep for tears. Her father sent a short letter and nothing more. Soon after, he decided she was an inconvenience and sent her to Mr. Petton as a burden to be hidden. That was when Vivian learned what it meant to be truly alone. At Petton's house, silence became her armor. The more she said nothing, the less they noticed her. They forgot she was there. They spoke freely around her. They shared secrets. She listened. She learned. She waited. Then, one rainy Tuesday, everything changed. The Duke of Ashford came to the house looking for a wife. He did not want love or comfort. He wanted a solution. Mr. Rabbit and Gunshot. Petton, smelling profit, offered him the mute girl, a wife who would never speak, never argue, never demand anything. £10 was agreed upon. Vivian stood in the cold drawing room as they spoke about her, as if she were not there. The Duke looked at her with gray eyes that held no warmth, but also no cruelty, just distance. He agreed. The deal was made. Coins were counted, and Vivian was sold again. She left that house with only a small bundle of her things, a worn dress that once belonged to her mother, a shawl that still held a faint scent of her, and a tiny locket with her mother's picture hidden inside. As the carriage pulled away, she did not look back. Ashford Hall was large and cold and beautiful. Stone walls rose into the mist like something from a story. Servants stared at her in quiet shock. This was their new duchess, a poor, silent girl in worn clothes. The Duke showed her to her rooms and spoke in a calm voice that held no anger. He told her she would not be disturbed, that she could live as she pleased, that he expected nothing from her. Vivian watched him leave, unsure if she should feel relief or fear. Days passed. She explored the house, walked through empty halls, and sat in the large library where dust covered the books. The servants whispered about her. Poor thing. Mute. Sad. She let them think it. One day, she heard voices in a study. The Duke and his aunt were speaking. Vivian stood still and listened. The Duke would lose everything if he did not have a child within 6 months. That was the secret behind the rushed marriage. But he had chosen a wife who could not speak and could not give legal consent. In trying to protect himself from becoming a cruel man like his father, he had trapped himself. Vivian felt something strange in her chest. Pity. Understanding. This man was not cold. He was afraid. Later, the Duke began leaving books for her in the library. Books about trauma, about silence, about voices that had been lost and found again. He was trying to understand her. Then came the invitation to a grand diplomatic event. Leaders and nobles from across Europe would attend. Vivian would go too, dressed like a duchess and silent as always. At the event, she stood beside the Duke while men spoke nearby in Russian. They laughed and shared plans to steal the Duke's business and ruin him. They thought no one could understand them. But Vivian did. Her heart pounded. She had to warn him. She reached for his arm. He turned. Their eyes met. "You understand them," he said quietly. She held his gaze. In a small room away from the crowd, she spoke for the first time in years. Her voice was soft but clear. She told him everything. The Duke stared at her in shock. "You can speak." "Yes," she said. "I always could." In that moment, both of their lives changed forever. The Duke did not speak for a long moment after Vivian's words fell into the small study. The lamp between them flickered, throwing shadows across his face, and she saw something she had never seen there before. Shock, yes, but also awe, and beneath it all, a deep, aching relief. "You understood every word," he said quietly. "All this time." Vivian nodded. Now that she had broken the silence, there was no point hiding behind it again. Her heart was racing, but there was also a strange calm inside her, as if something long locked away had finally been released. "I understood more than they ever guessed," she said. "That is why they are dangerous. They think you blind. They think me invisible." He ran a hand through his dark hair and let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh, though there was no humor in it. "I married a woman for 10 pounds, he said slowly, "and discovered she is the cleverest person in the room." She met his gaze. "You did not marry me for my mind. You married me because you thought I would never speak." "Yes," he admitted, "and I was wrong." They returned to the ballroom as if nothing had happened. Vivian slipped back into her role, eyes lowered, lips closed. But everything felt different now. The Duke stood closer to her, his hand brushed against hers, steady and protective. Over the next days, their secret meetings began. Each morning, Vivian went to the Duke's study. The door was locked. The curtains were drawn. There, she told him everything she had heard and everything she knew. Names, languages, dates, motives. She explained how the men spoke when they believed no one understood them, how greed loosened tongues faster than wine. The Duke listened like a man starving for truth. He asked questions. He wrote notes. He trusted her. Trust was something Vivian had not known in a very long time. Slowly, they began to speak of other things too. Not plans or danger, but memories. He told her about his mother, how she had grown smaller each year under his father's cold rule, how the house had felt like a prison even when it glittered. Vivian told him about her own mother, about laughter in grand rooms that were never truly home, about love given freely and paid for dearly. They were alike in ways that surprised them both. Two children shaped by loss, two people who had learned to survive by building walls. One afternoon, as autumn light spilled through the tall windows, the Duke asked her a question that caught her off guard. "Why did you never speak?" he said. "Not even to save yourself." Vivian was quiet for a moment. Then she answered honestly, "Because every time I spoke before, it was used against me. Words were twisted. Promises were broken. Silence was the only thing no one could take." He nodded slowly. "I understand that more than you know." Something softened between them after that. The distance remained, but it was no longer empty. It was careful. The plan took shape as winter approached. The Duke would host a grand gathering at Ashford Hall. The very men plotting against him would attend, certain they had already won. Vivian would listen one final time. And then, when the moment came, the truth would be revealed. But such a plan required courage. It required Vivian to stand before a room full of powerful men and speak openly. The thought made her hands shake at night when she was alone. The Duke noticed. One evening, he found her in the library, staring at nothing. "You do not have to do this," he said gently. "I will find another way." She shook her head. "If I hide again, I will never forgive myself. I have been silent long enough." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Then I will stand with you." In the weeks that followed, something else grew between them. something neither had planned. It started with lessons. The Duke asked Vivian to teach him Russian. She laughed, the sound surprising them both. It had been so long since laughter came easily to her. He was a terrible student. His accent was rough, his patience short. But he tried, and that effort meant more to her than perfect words ever could. Sometimes their hands brushed as she corrected his writing. Sometimes he watched her speak with quiet wonder, as if every word was a small miracle. One afternoon, as she laughed at his poor pronunciation, he leaned closer without thinking. The laughter faded. The space between them vanished. The kiss was gentle and uncertain, as if both were afraid of breaking something fragile. When it ended, they stood very still. "I did not plan that," he said. "Neither did I," she replied. They did not speak of love, not yet. But the walls between them were no longer whole. As winter deepened, danger crept closer. The conspirators grew bold. Papers were prepared. Meetings were set. Time pressed against them like a closing door. Then the night arrived. Ashford Hall shone with light. Candles glowed. Music filled the halls. Guests arrived in silks and dark coats, smiling and bowing and hiding knives behind polite words. Vivian moved among them, quietly, listening. Russian, French, German. Each language told the same story. They believed victory was near. At the appointed hour, the Duke stepped forward. The room fell silent, of trust, of family honor. Then he turned to Vivian. "My wife has something to say." The room stirred with confusion and amusement. Vivian stepped forward. For a heartbeat, fear threatened to pull her back into silence. She thought of Mr. Piton, of the coins, of every time her voice had been punished. Then she looked at the Duke. He met her gaze, steady and sure. She spoke. Her voice carried across the room, clear and strong. Gasps rippled through the guests, faces drained of color. She spoke in English, then Russian, then French. She named names. She spoke of forged documents and whispered deals. The room erupted. Men shouted. Others fled. Guards were called. The conspirators were exposed, their confidence collapsing into panic. When it was over, when the guests were gone and the hall was quiet once more, the Duke took Vivian's hands in his. "You saved everything," he said. "No," she replied softly. "We did." That night, they stood together at a window, watching the snow fall over the dark grounds. For the first time, Vivian did not feel like a purchased thing or a silent shadow. She felt seen, and somewhere deep inside, hope began to take root. The days after the reception moved like a dream. Vivian half believed she might wake from it any moment. Ashford Hall, once so quiet and distant, buzzed with voices and footsteps. Officials came and went. Papers were signed. Men who had once smiled politely were led away with their heads lowered. The danger that had hovered over the Duke like a dark cloud finally broke apart. Through it all, Vivian stayed close to Sebastian, not as a silent figure beside him, but as his equal. He asked her opinion. He trusted her judgment, and each time he did, something healed inside her that she had not known was still broken. The world outside Ashford changed how it looked at her almost overnight. Whispers spread through London society. The mute Duchess was not mute at all. She was brilliant, dangerous, unusual. Some said she was a spy. Others claimed she had been trained in secret courts across Europe. Vivian let them talk. She had spent too many years being invisible to worry now about being misunderstood. Inside the house, changes were quieter but deeper. The servants no longer avoided her eyes. They bowed with real respect. Some looked at her with awe, others with fear, but none with pity. Lady Constance, stiff and sharp as ever, began asking Vivian to sit with her in the afternoons. Their conversations were careful at first, then thoughtful. Respect grew where suspicion had once lived. "You surprised us all," Lady Constance said one evening. "Including me." Vivian smiled gently. "I have learned that people often do." Sebastian changed too. The man who once hid behind distance and silence now laughed more easily. He spoke openly. He no longer rode alone at dawn to escape his thoughts. Instead, he walked with Vivian through the gardens. Even in the cold, his hand wrapped around hers as if he feared letting go. One evening, weeks after the scandal ended, they sat before the fire in the library. The room smelled of old books and burning wood, a scent that had come to mean safety to Vivian. "There is still the matter of the will," Sebastian said quietly. "The deadline." Vivian nodded. They had both avoided the subject as if naming it might break what they had built. "I never intended to ask anything of you," he continued. "When I married you, I planned to live alone, even with a wife. I swore I would never trap another woman the way my father trapped my mother." She reached for his hand. "You have not trapped me. But the law is cruel," he said, "and the past is not easily escaped." Vivian looked at him steadily. "Sebastian, I did not find my voice just to be silent again. I choose you. Not because of your title or your estate. I choose you because you see me." His breath caught. "Are you certain," he asked, almost afraid of the answer, "that this is what you want?" "Yes," she said without hesitation. "For the first time in my life, I am certain of something." That night, their love became something complete. Not rushed, not taken, chosen. Vivian did not feel fear. She felt trust. She felt free. Winter passed slowly, then softened into spring. The grounds of Ashford bloomed with new life. Flowers opened. Birds returned. And with the changing season came a quiet truth Vivian carried inside her. She knew before the doctor confirmed it. When she told Sebastian, she did not speak at first. She simply placed his hand over her heart and let him feel how fast it was beating. He understood. Tears filled his eyes, and he did not try to hide them. He knelt before her as if she were something sacred and pressed his forehead against her. "I promise you," he said, his voice shaking, "our child will never know fear in this house." Vivian believed him. The months that followed were gentle and full. Sebastian watched over her with care that sometimes made her laugh. He insisted on walks, on rest, on warm blankets even when the sun shone. He read books on childbirth as if preparing for battle. He listened to her with a patience that still amazed her. Lady Constance softened too. When she learned Vivian was expecting, she smiled in a way that transformed her sharp face into something almost kind. "I was wrong," she said plainly, "about you, about everything." Vivian only nodded. Forgiveness came easily now. She no longer needed anger to survive. The baby arrived on a warm summer night, after long hours filled with pain and effort. Sebastian never left Vivian's side. He held her hand, whispered her name, reminded her to breathe when she thought she could not endure another moment. And then the cry filled the room. A daughter, small, perfect, alive. They named her Marguerite, for the woman who had given Vivian life and love when the world had offered nothing else. Sebastian held their child as if afraid she might vanish. Vivian watched him and felt a peace deeper than any silence she had ever known. Years passed. Ashford Hall became a home in truth, not just name. Laughter echoed in its halls. Children's footsteps followed. Vivian taught her daughter languages the way her mother once taught her, softly and with joy. Sebastian watched them with pride that never faded. The story of the mute duchess who spoke 7 languages became legend. Visitors came, hoping to see her speak in foreign tongues, to hear the voice that had undone powerful men. Sometimes she obliged, often she did not. Her voice was no longer a weapon or a shield. It was simply hers. In quiet moments, Vivian sometimes thought of that rainy Tuesday, of the coins on the table, of the girl who believed silence was the only way to survive. She wished she could reach back through time and take that girl's hands. "You were never broken," she would tell her. "You were only waiting to be heard." On a calm evening, many years later, Vivian sat beside Sebastian as the sun set over Ashford. Their hair had silvered, their hands still fit together, as they always had. "Do you regret anything?" he asked softly. She considered the question, then smiled. "No," she said, "not even the silence." Sebastian nodded. "Nor I." And as the light faded, Vivian knew the truth of her life. She had been sold as a mute bride, but she had found her voice, her love, and a future worth more than any price ever placed upon her.